Hey everybody, Tommy here with another Blotto Beatles Chaser episode. We recently sat down with author Chris McKittrick. Last year, Chris came out with the book Can't Give It Away on 7th Avenue, which is about the Rolling Stones' time in New York City. The episode we recorded with Chris won't be out for a few weeks yet. And just this week, Chris is coming out with the book Somewhere You Feel Free, which is about Tom Petty's move to Los Angeles and how that impacted his life and his music. We had a great time sitting down with Chris, talking about Petty and the Heartbreakers, the Traveling Wilburys, and of course, the Beatles. And we didn't want this week to go by when he's releasing his new book without giving you a taste of that conversation. So he's a great guy. We really appreciated his time. And without further ado, here is another Blotto Beatles Chaser. It's really an honor and a privilege. I'd like to introduce the Blotto Scruffs to our guest for the evening, scholar and author himself, Mr. Chris McKittrick. Just released the book Somewhere You Feel Free about Tom Petty's years in Los Angeles and playing music. I'm really excited to have you here, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me along.
Yeah. And Petty, I think I could probably talk about Petty all night, but what do you think it was that drove you to really focus in on Tom Petty and these years and what brought you to this book?
So my previous book that I wrote was Can't Give It Away on 7th Avenue, The Rolling Stones in New York City, where I wrote about the connection between this band from across the Atlantic Ocean and how much history they had in New York City, not just the concerts and recordings, but, publicity stunts. And they live, Jagger, Richards, and Wood all lived in the city. So I wanted to do something similar when I was writing a follow-up book. And I decided to go with Petty simply because he's a similar case where he was from someplace else. I mean, he's unmistakably from Northern Florida. He never lost that accent. But yet he moved to Los Angeles in the mid-'70s and really made that his home base and became part of really what we think of the Southern California music tradition of the Byrds and Buffalo Springfield. He actually himself argued that he's the last of that chain, which I don't know if that's presumptuous or it's probably true, to be honest.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what I would replace him with, I don't know
it's a
what
little
I would challenge him on,
self-congratulatory, but it works. I get it.
There's something to be said about saying that, I'm the last in line here. So, better appreciate me or whatever. So, I myself am a transplant to Los Angeles. I'm living here now. And, I felt very sort of connected in that sense of coming from across the way and writing about someone who's a transplant, but really became part of the love and the lore of the city himself.
Great. I love it.
I'm going to say this without having checked the stats on where the geography of our listeners are from, but isn't it a little amazing that Petty's from Florida? In some way, who is bigger and from Florida in the music world? And I'm probably not thinking, it's probably right in front of my face, but is there a bigger star from Florida?
What's so interesting is, Petty's from Gainesville, Florida, which is really just known for University of Florida. But from that town came Tom and Bernie Leadon. Bernie Leadon, of course, from the Eagles. Don Felder, also later joined the Eagles. And then Tom Leadon later became a member of he was a member of Mudcrutch, which was Tom Petty's sort of side band. All of the Heartbreakers were connected to Gainesville. So it's insane to think that this town produced so much raw musical talent, in a short period of time, which is it's pretty eye opening. But you're correct. I think Petty is the one that people most think of when they think of what rock stars are from Florida. I mean, Jim Morrison was from Florida, but nobody thinks of Jim Morrison, or he was in Florida for a while. Nobody really thinks of him as Floridian. Tom Petty, I think, is the one that people usually think of.
Yeah, the Doors absolutely like adopted the West Coast.
Yeah.
Tried to erase, I think, Florida from their history.
I think the West Coast has been trying to distance themselves from that for years, actually. They're like, no, he's from Florida. Trust me. I'm a huge Tom Petty fan. I love Petty, and he's always kind of been on the periphery of my like deep dives. I don't think I've ever done it. And, full disclosure at this point, we are recording this prior to, Chris, your book actually being released. When this episode is released, by the time it comes out, your book has been out, and you sent us some excerpts from it, and it's great reading. I can't wait to get in more. And as I was reading through the excerpt, there were some images that just stuck out at me. Do you mind if we throw like a couple spoilers out to the listening audience here so they hear some of this? Because these facts were just amazing to me.
Go right ahead.
Tom Petty used to throw his own softball games and then had to go to Save On to buy extra softball mitts for people. That's amazing. Okay. Bob Dylan manning a barbecue is incredible. Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, and Roy Orbison not being able to put down the hood of Petty's new car.
Those are some of the bits that were a ton of fun in your
I'll never forget. Yeah. Scott, I know you like this one too. Tom Petty, George Harrison, and Jeff Lynne at a Denny's.
Yeah.
Who got the moons over my hammy, I wonder. And then finally, the Full Moon Fever release party was on the Starship Enterprise with George Harrison, Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, the Beastie Boys, Duff McKagan, and Steven Adler. Make it so. I want to go to that party.
There's an amazing photo from that. Kurt Loder interviewed Petty for whatever syndicated rock show he was doing at the time. And Petty is sitting in the captain's chair on the Enterprise, smoking a cigarette with a drink in his hand. And, wow. I didn't know that you could smoke on the Enterprise, but, Tom Petty lights up a cigarette. No one's going to tell him, put him out, even if you're on the Enterprise. But yeah, he was, his label was owned by Universal at the time. So Universal Studios had the Star Trek adventure experience. And he said, can I do my album release party there? And they said, yeah, why not?
That's incredible.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah.
Special thanks once again to our guest, Chris McKittrick, for joining us. Don't forget to come back in a few weeks to hear the full episode with Chris. And don't forget, go out right now and pick up his just-released book, Somewhere You Feel Free, about Tom Petty moving to Los Angeles, his years in Los Angeles. You can grab that wherever you get your books. We will be back next week with an official episode of Blotto Beatles. And until then, my friends, peace and love. Peace and love.